It's been a long day in the tall tree forest. I guess I'll eat some dinner. Would you like some wine to wash it down? No, I'll just have tea. Come on, you've been working hard. Treat yourself to some wine. I never drink wine, just give me some tea. You won't know if you like it if you don't try it. I said I don't want to try it. What's up with you and that wine? It's just really good. I swear, there's no spinal fluid in it. Spinal fluid? Why would there be spinal? Hey guys, don't drink the wine, it's spinal fluid! Before I get into the review, I just want to remind everyone that I do have a Patreon now. I know many of you are already aware, but if you haven't checked it out yet and you think you might be interested, well, there is a link in the video description. So in this arc, the final arc of the available episodes so far, we find out a whole lot about Zeke's spinal fluid. And we learn that Zeke's spinal fluid is what's been behind a whole lot of the mysteries that we've seen, mostly in season 2, where we saw Connie's family and that village all get turned into Titans, and I kind of wondered about how it happened. Well, Zeke sort of recounts that story to Levi, but we'll find out from what happens a little bit later on that probably Zeke's a little bit of an unreliable narrator. He explains like using gas because he wants to maybe not tip his hand into how he's really been spreading out the spinal fluid, or maybe it does work in a gas form too. Like maybe it behaves differently as a gas than it does as a liquid that's potable. But we do learn that Zeke's spinal fluid, when consumed by people, by Eldians, well, then his scream is what activates them to turn into Titans. They don't have to have the injection, but they still have to have spinal fluid, because I've been kind of curious, like, how does his power work? And from what I see here, I also assume that Zeke's power only works with his own spinal fluid, right? I don't think it works if you're injected with another Titan's spinal fluid. I think Zeke's spinal fluid responds to his scream, and then I would also kind of infer that it's folks with Zeke's spinal fluid who become Titans that he's able to control. So he has a coordinate power, but not anything on the level of the founding Titans' ability to control other Titans. So it's very limited only to those Titans that are created by his spinal fluid. That's what I'm guessing here. And I'm not really trying to predict anything. That's just how I interpret what we're shown across these episodes here, the final 4 episodes of the first part of the final season. But it makes me wonder, like, how many lumbar punctures has Zeke gotten over the years to accumulate all this spinal fluid? I mean, I like it that all these powers seem to have a limit set on it, and with Zeke, that limit is that it has to be his own spinal fluid, and then you go beyond that and you think he's constantly getting these long needles jabbed into his back to draw this spinal fluid out. Now, with his Titan healing ability, I guess he's not worried about scar tissue or anything like that, but it's still an uncomfortable procedure. I don't know if any of you have ever seen a spinal tap or had a spinal tap. A lumbar puncture is what they call it. It's scary to watch. Thank goodness I've never had one. I mean, if you need it for medical reasons, don't be afraid of it. But to think of subjecting yourself to repeated lumbar punctures just to get spinal fluid to use as this secret weapon, this top secret weapon, that's kind of gruesome and a horror all of its own. I don't know if in part 2 of the final season we'll get some flashbacks of Zeke lying on a table from the time he was very young, like in excruciating pain getting these lumbar punctures. When I say very young, I mean when he first became the Beast Titan, so I don't know, late teens or something. But I wonder if we're going to get some of those gruesome details, or we're going to see some of that pain that he suffered and see how he's probably had to learn to like do his own spinal taps and draw out his own spinal fluid. This is just a crazy step. A crazy level I wasn't expected, and I love it. Now, some more insight with Niccolo, the chef, the cook, the person who made the lobster. I totally missed it on first watch. I have to admit, I have to concede that I was a little naive. I thought he just liked Sasha because it's fun to see somebody really enjoy the food you made. It's fun to see somebody appreciate your art, so to speak. But yeah, he was in love with Sasha, and people pointed that out to me, and I just kind of like slapped myself on the forehead, felt like such an idiot for not being able to figure that out on my own. But on rewatch and with that information, it really makes the whole arc that Niccolo has at the end of part 1 of season 4, it really adds a whole nother dimension to it that I can't believe I was missing that first time around. Great to see. Also interesting that I don't really know how Sasha felt about Niccolo. I don't know, people seem to suggest that maybe they were in love, but maybe he was just kind of obsessed with her a little bit. But that really informs and explains a whole lot of what Niccolo does that I was a little confused by the first time through, but I love it. Another great part of the story there. And it's wonderful how you could almost say that Sasha has contributed more to this story since her death than she did during the first 3 seasons when she was alive, and she was a wonderful character, and she was great at times, and she had that wonderful skill with the bow, but she didn't seem to move major parts of the story alive nearly as much as she has since she's been gone. And I think she's like a souped up version of Marco in that regard. And then on the last review video, I was speculating about Gabi and what kind of character arc Gabi might have. If there's hope for redemption with Gabi, keep waiting to see if something's going to click with her, and I thought maybe it would when she was confronting Kaya. And then here again is another moment that could have potential to change who Gabi is. And when she's captured, Niccolo finds out she's the one who killed Sasha because of his love for Sasha. He's very angry about that, and he creates this ridiculously horrific scene where he has this child, and you know, some people say they're not childs, that's not the proper term, children. They're not children, they're trained warriors. Child warriors are still children. I mean, that's what makes it such a war crime and so horrific, and why we generally frown upon child soldiers around the world. At least I do. But he creates this horrific scene where he drags her in to Mr. Browse, Sasha's father, tells him exactly who she is, offers him like this butcher knife, and holds her execution style, just waiting for Mr. Browse to execute Gabi. And Gabi fully thinks she deserves it. Like, she's in a situation where if the tables were turned, she wouldn't hesitate to execute the person. And she can't understand why Mr. Browse wants to spare her, and she can't understand why Hanji wants to spare her. She's totally confused by people having an aversion to murdering a child. And I wonder if maybe this is going to be part of this character development, or part of this eventual redemption I want to see in Gabi. But of course, when the tables kind of get turned yet again a little bit later in the episode, we see Gabi fall back into that same old, like, narrow-minded, one-track mind of destroying the Eldians and becoming an honorary Marleyan, particularly when Peak shows up. So I don't know how many times they're going to challenge her and then have her reject that challenge before it finally takes hold, or maybe if it's never going to take hold. I don't know, but I'm becoming more intrigued by the Gabi saga. And Sasha's father, Mr. Browse, does have a great line when he's talking about the issues with Gabi, and, you know, one reason he doesn't want to execute her, other than the obvious that it's sort of morally wrong in that situation. But he talks about we need to get these children out of the forest, and he talks about how he helped get Sasha out of the forest, and he's using that as a metaphor for breaking the cycle of hate, because the cycle of hate is the forest in this situation. And one of the reasons he chooses not to murder Gabi there is he wants to do what he can to try to break that cycle of hate and get these children, both people like Kaya and Gabi, out of the forest. But we see maybe he doesn't succeed. Of course, you got to keep trying if you don't succeed on the first try, right? But not only does Gabi kind of reject the lesson here, but immediately Kaya, the greatest jump scare I think I've seen in all of Attack on Titan. I don't know if you would call it a jump scare, but I jumped. I was a little caught off guard. Kaya just runs out with an ice pick. Like, the last person I was thinking of coming in and trying to kill Gabi there was Kaya, and she runs in, beautifully executed scene, totally unexpected, just out of nowhere, really gets my adrenaline pumping. Of course, Mikasa's there, quick as lightning, manages to save Gabi in that situation. Gabi can't understand why Mikasa wants to save her, why Armin wants to let her live, but they do. Kaya fells her potential opportunity to get out of the forest in this moment, and Gabi does a little bit later on with Peak. We go to the tall tree forest, where Levi is kind of reflecting on everything, because he's there with that guard of 30 people. He's got Zeke out there in what they think is a safe place where Zeke can't do any harm. We're going to find out they maybe underestimated Zeke's ability to do harm, but he's out there, and I'm wondering if Levi regrets all the things he's done to save Eren. I mean, he thinks about how Pixis's plan is to feed Eren to someone else while Eren is on his way to the tall tree forest. To, like, intercept him, feed him to someone else, pass on all of Eren's accumulated Titan power. And Levi reflects on all the people that he's been friends with, all the people he's cared about that have died because of his repeated exercises to rescue Eren, his repeated actions to rescue Eren from almost when they first met. And I thought perhaps Levi's finally starting to feel regret. I shouldn't say finally, but for the first time. He's so well known in my mind from that OVA, A Choice with No Regrets, of being the person, you make the choice, you follow it through, you don't allow yourself to have regrets or else you're paralyzed with fear or with indecision. But here, I'm starting to think he finally has a regret, but then his thoughts kind of turn that around and he says, no, the person, the Titan we need to feed to someone is Zeke. And he takes on his own plan of action to feed Zeke to someone else, have another Titan, get that Beast Titan power. Even though we suddenly then will lose Eren's ability to use the Founding Titan power without Zeke, we do still have a royal bloodline. Historia's still in the background. Historia's going to have a child. So there's still potential to use it on down the road. But it sounds like for the most part, Levi would rather lose the ability to have the rumbling and not have Eren under Zeke's sort of mental control or mental manipulation. So I think Levi still has some kind of hope for redemption with Eren, or some kind of level of belief that because Erwin thought saving Eren was the right thing to do, Zeke is still committed to that. That's what I take out of that sort of internal monologue. Also by Levi's actions once Zeke unleashes his plan on Levi. But saying that, I guess it's a really good thing that Levi only drinks tea, isn't it? And I know that there has been some kind of suggestion, some speculation, some debate in the comments about whether an Ackerman can actually even be turned into a Titan. But just to be on the safe side, it's a good thing Levi doesn't drink wine. He sticks to the tea. I guess you're a cold-blooded killer like Levi. You can't risk being an angry drunk and killing everybody over an argument in a card game. So it's a good thing for a lot of reasons that he doesn't drink the wine and he sticks to tea. But why chance it? Maybe an Ackerman can't become a Titan, but maybe they can. He doesn't drink the wine with the spinal fluid. So when we have this incredible sort of unveiling of Zeke's plan, we have this horrible ambush where Zeke just shouts out and all of the scouts that are up in the trees standing guard, they just all turn into Titans, and you get this giant flabby Titan rainfall just coming down all around, catching him off guard. But Levi faces it like a champ. We'll get back to how he reacts here and what I make out of that. But I want to talk some more about Gabi, because back in the restaurant scene, Gabi's been saved. She's talking to Armin, and some folks have been, disagreeing or debating, having some respectful discourse about whether or not Gabi is anything like Eren. Well, Armin shares his opinion here because Armin's talking to Gabi, and he says to her, I think this is as close to a direct quote as I can get. I was trying to write it down. But he says, always with the killing. It's all you ever talk about, just like someone else I know. I think that someone else I know is obviously Eren, right? Thinking of young Eren and his hatred and his wanting to kill all the Titans. And here we have Gabi wanting to kill all the Eldians here in Paradis, wanting to kill Eren Yeager. And as he says that, as if the words alone weren't enough to communicate it, we get some visual communication, some narrative communication, because just as he says that, Eren walks through the door. So he says, you remind me of someone else I know, totally unexpected, catching me off guard, just out of the blue. Eren walks right into the room, and everybody's wondering where Eren is. Well, he shows up. And of course, he's got his palm bloody. So having his palm bloody with Eren, that's the equivalent of walking into a room with a grenade and the pin's already pulled and you're just holding the handle down and all you got to do is let go and boom. So he's walking in there with the loaded weapon. So any conversation that's going to happen is going to be happening under the shadow of a threat of violence, potential mass destruction even. And Eren coming in with his friends, with the only people still alive that may have ever loved him or cared about him or known him before he became a Titan. He walks in here with such a cold attitude and such a single-mindedness, and he's ready to go to violence, and it seems so out of place. But this was something pointed out to me on the Patreon. And when you think back to at the end when we see that day and Grisha's talking to the owl, to Kruger up on the wall at Paradis, the owl said the only way you can save Armin and Mikasa is to stick to the plan. And we start thinking about, wow, not only is the shared memory retrograde, but you can remember the future, like some kind of little twist here. But he says the only way to save Armin and Mikasa is to stick to the plan. So when Eren comes in here so cold, so threatening, so distant, so confrontational with Armin and Mikasa, This must be because he's so single-mindedly dedicated to saving them that he's going to stick to the plan no matter how distasteful it might appear. His number one goal is not for them to continue to love him and care about him. His number one goal is to save them. Once again, not my idea, suggested to me on the Patreon, and I loved it. Just wanted to share that I think part of his ability to be so cold and so cruel to Armin and Mikasa is because he has to stick to the plan for the sole purpose of saving them. It kind of reminds me of some story I saw like when I was growing up, like maybe a movie from the 70s or the 60s or a TV show, and like somebody had a pet bear, and I think it was a bear, and they needed the bear to go out and be with other bears because it was going to get killed if it stayed in town, but the bear loved the kid so much it wouldn't go away. So the kid had to throw rocks at the bear and like say, I hate you, go away. It was breaking his heart to do that, but he had to do that to save the bear. I think a similar thing happens in Game of Thrones with Arya and her wolf Nymeria, but I think this is like throwing rocks at the bear or throwing rocks at the wolf to get him to go out into the wild, acting like you hate them to save them. I think some of that's going on here with Eren. I guess we'll find out soon when the second part of the season comes out. But we also have Eren talking to Mikasa. Part of this trying to get them to hate him a little bit, I think, so they'll distance themselves from him or present themselves as his enemy so he can sacrifice himself somehow to save them. But part of it is he talks about this Ackerman bond, or the way that the Ackermans are sort of genetically encoded to protect the king, but back when he helped her stab people to death as 9-year-olds when she was kidnapped, that caused her to have her switch turn on, and she imprinted on him instead of the king. She has to protect Eren by some kind of internal drive, and even demonstrates this a little bit. But I wonder, Levi's an Ackerman, and Levi also killed and remembers having that switch get flipped. So who did Levi imprint on? I don't know. Like, it could have been some of his friends who died in the OVA when they finally went out with the scouts. But also, he had a lot of killing and a whole lot that happened out on the battlefield in that OVA with Eren. And I wonder if maybe he imprinted on Eren. When you look at how single-mindedly dedicated Levi is to Eren, and particularly if he had this Ackerman imprint on Eren, that would explain his very, very strong position on wanting to save Eren in Shiganshina instead of Armin, with that whole big episode where I was Team Armin all the way. Obviously, Levi was Team Eren. I wonder if that was something else that I didn't even consider that could have been interfering with his intentions a little bit too, is the fact he might have been imprinted on Eren, very similar to the way Mikasa is imprinted on Eren. Boy, it's hard to say Eren and Eren in succession and not mix them up. Just a thought. Just wondering, do you guys have ideas on who Levi might have imprinted on in that manner? Let me know. Also in this confrontation with Armin and Mikasa, something that I didn't think about that really should have been quite obvious in retrospect, but Eren suggests that it's Bertolt's memories, or I think more importantly, Bertolt's feelings, are finally starting to infiltrate Armin a little bit, and that's why Armin has been spending so much time talking to Annie in her big crystal coconut, because of course we know that Bertolt had this huge crush on Annie, and now Armin might be kind of picking that up secondhand through Bertolt's memories and emotions since he has taken on the power of the Colossal Titan. Really should have been obvious to me when it was happening. I needed Eren to point it out for it to make sense, but I really like that idea, and I want to see more of Bertolt come out in Armin. I think that's interesting. Also, I think it'll be a great way to give us insight into some of Bertolt's experiences, thoughts, feelings that we haven't gotten so far. I mean, we did get quite a bit in Season 3, but I really want to see more of Bertolt's experience through Armin's eyes and see how that impacts his decision-making. But like I said before, Zeke hit Levi with one heck of an ambush. I mean, you've got titans falling from the trees. There are a lot of unpleasant things that can fall from trees. I've been hit on the head by like bird poop from a tree before, and that's not fun. But imagine a titan hitting you on the head. That's way worse than bird poop, which I used to think was a bad thing to fall out of a tree on you. Spiders could fall out of trees on you, not as bad as titans. But Levi continues to just own Zeke every time they fight. Even in this ridiculous outnumbered situation with 30 Titans, all being controlled by Zeke, plus these Titans are former scouts that Zeke was kind of betting on Levi being hesitant to kill his own former colleagues, which Zeke finds out he gambled wrong on that one. Levi is cold-blooded when there's a job to do. He understands these Titans are not his friends anymore. Maybe best case scenario, he feeds Zeke to one of them. Maybe that's what he wants to do here. He already said he wanted to feed Zeke to somebody. But he doesn't hesitate to do his Beyblade spiral technique, wipe out his own former colleagues. He even sees their human face in his mind superimposed on their Titan face. Doesn't let that stop him. And he just goes straight to Zeke, hits him with the Thunder Spear, cuts him out, tells him how ugly he is, and starts slicing and dicing his legs off just a little bit at a time. And in the comments, people pointed out the way that Levi did that wasn't just for practical reasons. You want to cut off his legs to keep him from turning into a Titan. You want to cut off his arms and legs. You can do that with 4 well-placed chops. But he was dicing them off a little bit at a time because he wanted to savor the punishment he was giving Zeke. He wanted to torture Zeke in that moment. So full of rage, but couldn't kill him. So he had to do the next best thing in his mind, which was torture the guy pretty severely. And when this whole fight is going down and Levi does kill those Titans that were formerly his colleagues in the Scouts, he says this really chilling line that just stuck with me, and it honestly makes me feel sad for Levi, a character who I felt sad for a lot, given his upbringing, given who raised him, his father figure, given the situation with his mom. I mean, there's so many reasons for me to just feel sadness because Levi has such a sad story, but this takes the cake with this line. He says, "You have no idea how many friends I've had to kill." And that just tells me so much about why Levi is who he is, why Levi is as capable as he is, how he's managed to be so cold, but more than anything, it's what a cruel situation this world that he lives in has put him in to find himself. I would never want to be in a situation where I could honestly say, you have no idea how many of my friends I've had to kill. That one broke my heart for sure. So much stuff breaking my heart in these 4 episodes. We do see Shadis is still working with those cadets. You know, I didn't even know if cadet training would still be around, but we see they're still training scouts. They're still training them with mobility gear and blades and how to fight Titans. But he's no longer a bystander here. His sort of devoted episode was the one called Bystander, and he finally had to realize he is not a main character. He is a side character in this story. But here he stops being a bystander. He gets really, really involved. Flock shows up with the Jaegerists, recruits scouts to the Jaegerist cause and to their faction, and he orders them to mercilessly beat Shadis. And even though Shadis is about to be, well, tortured is really the only way I can say it. He's about to just be beaten for no reason that's not necessary at all. He's still, I think, and other people pointed this out to me. I'm not trying to take credit for just coming up with this all on my own, but I agree with this. I think that when he says, come on, you guys can't handle me, like he is bringing it, right? He is ready to have one last glorious fight. But he's saying that to encourage them on so they will do it, so they won't face any retribution from Flock and the Jaegerists, so they'll feel better about what they have to do, what he doesn't want them to do, but he knows they have to do. He's trying to lift that burden off of them. What a noble act of self-sacrifice. I love that, and I'm glad that he finally, I'm assuming this is the end of Shadis' story, maybe it's not, but he finally got to stop being a bystander, and for a few minutes he was the main character there. But is Flock really sadistic? Like, one thing I hope we get in the second part of this final season is sort of some information about what happened to Flock during that time jump. What happened to Flock during those lost years? Because he seems ridiculously sadistic here. He seems to not just have his political cause and he wants to support the Jaeger brothers, specifically Eren. You know, he's Eren's #1 fan, but he seems to be enjoying this in a really cruel way. He seems to have developed some cruelty that's not necessary for the job. And what happened? He has a psychopathic smile when he smiles. His eyes look sadistic when he talks. What happened to transform him? I mean, that nugget was always there. His reason for wanting to save Erwin instead of Armin back in Shiganshina is because he wanted Erwin to live to suffer. So even there was a hint at his sadism at that point in time, but Flock could really be turning into a really problem character with what we're seeing here. And I'm dying to know more about who Flock was before he met Eren and what created him, what created the person he is so he came to this point. I've got so many questions about Flock. And after all the fight and everything goes down between Zeke and Levi, Zeke is thoroughly beaten. There's, no question that Levi has him right where it seems like he wants him. The only thing Zeke seems to care about is his glasses. And Levi points out that he doesn't need those glasses, but we catch on really, really quickly here that those glasses have sentimental value. And the reaction, I picked up on that one right away. And we get to see the story of Zeke's glasses. We see him tossing this baseball with a character named Kava, I think is how you pronounce it. It's spelled like K-Saver, but when I listen to it, it sounds like Kava or Sava. But we find out Zeke was not a strong warrior candidate. And we see what Zeke meant by the manipulation. Grisha wanted Zeke to become a warrior candidate so that he could become one of the warriors and could help the cause of the Fritz restorationists, or the Eldian restorationists. But he was not a strong warrior candidate. I was surprised at how disappointed Grisha was with him. What a poor relationship Grisha and Zeke came to have. And then he's tossing baseball with this person who is very formative for Zeke when Zeke's a young person. I think it's fair to say that he serves the role of the father Zeke wishes he would have had. And Grisha continues to be really toxic towards Zeke. So we do get better insight as to why Zeke turned in his parents. I mean, it's not like he just was angry with Grisha or angry with Dinah and he went to the authorities and turned him in, but he overheard that they were on the verge of being discovered anyway. So they were going to get captured, whether Zeke said anything or not. So he did step in and try to at least save his grandparents. Now, Zeke was also saving himself in the process, but it's always important to find whether or not it was purely self-serving, and I don't think it was purely self-serving because Zeke also saved his grandparents in this, and it allowed him to continue to be close with Kava, and for Kava to help change the relationship that Zeke had with the warrior training program to the point that Zeke does eventually get to inherit the Beast Titan, which we know he does that, right? But then we see the genesis of what they call the euthanization plan. I don't like the word euthanization for this plan for a couple of reasons. One, it's kind of a clunky word, like euthanize, euthanasia, those words are easier, but euthanization, it's like one syllable too many. But also, I don't think it's really euthanization. I don't think they're euthanizing anyone. They're wanting to sterilize the population. They want to use the power of the founding Titan to alter the DNA of the Eldians, to alter their physiology so they can no longer have children. So that is sterilization in my point. Euthanization is actually killing people to put them out of pain and out of misery. If you look at it on a population basis, you could say, well, they're killing the race to put them out of their misery. It's their soul salvation. I still don't like the word, but that's the last I'll say about that. That's just semantics, and I don't want to be semantically pedantic or whatever. But one thing I thought the whole time I'm seeing this is that Kava seemed a little old for the warrior program, because we're seeing these people trained as children and they get their 13 years and they're done before they're 30. And to me, Kava looked a little bit older than that. But we do find out he has his own story, that he had a family. And the racial hatred in Marley between the Marleyans and the Eldians is so strong that his wife slit the throat of their child. I don't care how you feel about some social constructs. I can't imagine killing your own child because they were half Eldian. And then she kills herself because she's married to an Eldian. So we see this obviously a very traumatic thing to happen to Kava. But then he joined the warrior program as a form of suicide almost. Like, he explains he didn't want to live anymore. He joins the warrior program like it's slow suicide, but you get a Titan, you've got that 13-year clock. Maybe you'll die in action before you get there. I don't know, but crazy slow, drawn-out suicide. But then he started to actually learn a lot when he got that Beast Titan. He became a scholar and not a fighter, which I think is interesting, particularly considering the military value that the Beast Titan seems to have with Zeke. But we do see Eren talking to Zeke. We get to see a little flashback before the attack in Liberio. And I'm starting to wonder if Eren is playing Zeke a little bit. Like, I've talked so much about Zeke and his four-dimensional chess and always being a step ahead. He showed how he was ahead of Levi here with his plan with the wine, how he was ahead of so much of Parody with all of his plans. But here when Eren is talking to Zeke, Eren says things that we've been taught Eren doesn't believe. Like, he believes that the greatest thing is to be born into this world, but he talks about the greatest curse here is to be born into this world. I wonder if he's playing Zeke to a degree because he wants to be able to use Zeke's power, but not to do what Zeke wants him to do. Eren is saying that he's going to cooperate with this euthanization plan. He says he's dedicated to it, but I can't wait to see in the next half of the season if there's not a twist there, and Eren, who always talks about the value of freedom, will not be manipulated by his older brother. Eren, who talks about the importance of being free and making your own decision, is not going to make the decision to euthanize or to sterilize an entire race of people. That is inconsistent with everything we've been told about Eren. One thing we've been shown about him is that he's sticking to some plan and he's unwavering in it. And if that plan is not the plan that Zeke presented him with, he's not going to change his plan and go along with Zeke. So I'm waiting to see the twist where we find out that Eren, he makes contact with Zeke, he unlocks that founding Titan power, and he does something totally different than the euthanization plan, probably different than the rumbling too. I don't know what his plan will be. I've had some thoughts, like maybe he could just take away their ability to pass on the Titan trait, like basically cleanse, if you want to use that word, the DNA of the Eldians so they're no different than the Marleyans. I don't know if he would even do that. Maybe he would make every single Eldian able to Titan shift at will. I don't know if that's a good idea. I don't know what his plan is, but there's a plan that his father got from Kruger that is the only way to save Armin and Mikasa, and if it is not the plan Zeke presented, which I don't think it is, he's not going to change his plan. But Zeke blows himself up. Levi puts this thunder spear on him because he thinks, hey, that'll keep Zeke from wiggling around too much. Honestly, I wish he had just chopped off his arms and legs and made him like the Black Knight from Monty Python and not have to worry about him. But he gave him this thunder spear, which was a way for Zeke to attack back indirectly. He's willing to blow himself up to try and kill Levi. Definitely kills a horse. I see a horse on fire, and if there's one thing I know about horses, they are not fireproof. I don't know if he succeeded in killing Levi, because we don't quite see that, but it looks like there's a chance. But before that happens, Zeke is lying there, and he's basically dying. It looks like he's dying, and he has this vision of a little girl. And if I remember correctly, she's a little blonde-haired girl. And there's no more information about that. And I wonder who this girl is. And I start to wonder if this is part of that circular memory, the way that they can remember the future as well as the past of the other people who've held their Titan power. And I don't know if this is true or not. I'm totally speculating, but I wonder if maybe this is Historia's unborn child, because she has that blonde hair. She looks like she has that Fritz bloodline, like Dinah, like Historia, and also like Zeke. And I wonder if this little girl is who will eventually inherit the Beast Titan's power. And that's why he's remembering her in the future, because they are the continuation of the Beast Titan from him to her. I like that idea. I love that idea. It's never a good thing to be too in love with your own ideas. It takes away your objectivity, but I wouldn't mind if that's what that turns out to be. We also see that under the leadership of Yelena, it's hard for me to say Yelena, I want to say Yelena, but under the leadership of Yelena, well, the Jaegerists are now implementing armbands just like the Marleyans did. Pixis points this out, points out the inherent hypocrisy of that, how you're becoming the monsters that you claim you want to destroy. There's always truth to that. History works in cycles. Always interesting for me to see that kind of thing play out in a narrative. And it goes all the way back to Animal Farm. 4 legs good, 2 legs better. All animals are created equal, but some are more equal than others. I like seeing this come in. I like seeing that Yelena is corrupted, that maybe she's not freshly corrupted, that her personality has changed a little bit from when she was in Marley to now that she's in Paradis, and that perhaps she has got some self-serving interest of her own that we haven't quite seen her ultimate goal yet. But we do see Peak stab her way onto the scene. I had questioned 4 episodes back, Peak shows up reading a paper kind of in disguise, undercover, and then we don't see what she's up to. And then she just, boom, shows up. Like, this show has a great way of people just showing up without any fanfare and almost in a quiet way, also showing up right when you're wondering where they are, because Eren has a plan to use Gabi to help find Peak's location, and then Peak shows up. Eren knows that Peak is bluffing, and he calls her on the bluff. They can't afford to kill the founding Titan. He understands that. She understands that. Gabi doesn't understand it, so Peak has to sort of direct Gabi away. But we find out Peak has a plan of her own. Everybody here has a plan, has an agenda. Everybody's sneaky. Everybody's up to something. What's going to happen? You never know till it happens. But she pretends to be a traitor, which really upsets Gabi. But then she turns out not to be a traitor, unless you consider her a traitor to the Eldians or a traitor to Zeke. But then we have this huge cliffhanger to end this part of the season. It's wonderful. I'm so glad I'm watching this season now because, man, I pity all of you who saw this happen 9 months ago and you've been waiting and waiting for January 9th, 2022 to get here. But it is great. They have Porco there, which I love it. The Jaw Titan kind of bursts up through the floor and starts fighting with Eren right away, chops off his legs, a great scene there. And I didn't catch it, but people pointed it out to me and I went back and watched and it's really cool. But Porco is like hiding in plain sight. Porco is mixed in among some of the Jaegerists as Peak is going up the stairs and waving. I totally missed it. I love it when I totally miss stuff like that. It makes the rewatch a whole lot more fun. It's fun stuff there. But I wonder, is Levi dead? Like, we saw the horse get burned up. I don't think Levi's dead. So when this big fight happens, is Levi going to show up? Like, is Levi going to pursue Zeke? Because we know Zeke is buried in the grody abdomen of a Titan. I imagine he's making his way to Shiganshino so he can meet with Eren. And then, of course, I expect Levi to pursue Zeke. So are they both going to show up about the same time in this fight? That's really what I think's going to happen. A lot of times what I think's going to happen doesn't happen, though. Also, oh man, Zeke shows up. He does his scream. All these people in the area turn into Titans. This could turn into chaos. It could be an incredible, visually thrilling battle to watch, but heartbreaking to see how many characters we know and love become Titans, and knowing that at most only about 3 of them can be saved. Now, Yelena explains the euthanization plan to Armin, and Armin is moved to tears. I don't know if I buy that. I don't know if I understand Armin crying over the euthanization plan as being such a noble plan. I mean, I know he wants the violence to stop, so maybe he's moved to tears by the idea of the violence stopping, but I also have to wonder if some of this is Bertolt coming through too, because Bertolt, I think, had a lot more self-loathing than Armin did, so I'm kind of curious if that's part of Bertolt coming through when Armin cries there, because that didn't seem like an Armin thing to me. Of course, I could be wrong. So what do I expect with part 2 of the final season? You know, January 9th, can't get here quick enough. Of course, I'm going to be reacting to all the episodes as quickly as possible. And I'm going to do a review for each single episode in the final half. But what do I expect? I expect to see what Eren's actual plan is, because I don't think his plan is to follow Zeke's plan. I do expect to see Zeke get passed on somehow to the Fritz bloodline, but that might be at the very end. I mean, we might need another time jump for that. And I do expect at some point Armin and Mikasa to understand that Eren doesn't really hate them, but I think we're going to see Mikasa's probably going to be the person who has to put Eren down. And I think it's going to be like of Mice and Men, you know, the Steinbeck book that we all had to read in junior high. But it's going to be a George and Lenny situation. And because she loves him, she wants to be the one to put him down. It's not right to let somebody else do it, but I kind of think we're headed on a collision course that way. But before that happens, I do think Eren's going to come back around. I think when we find out what his real plan is, that he's not really playing into Zeke's hands, I think he's going to have a moment where before he dies, he's allowed to die with dignity. I think we're going to be able to not feel bad about mourning him when he dies. I think the origin of the Titan power has to be explained. And a rumor I'm hearing a lot, and I'm kind of into this idea, but it doesn't end with part 2 of season 4. Perhaps there's also going to be a theatrically released movie, and if this gets followed up with the movie, that movie is going to be bonkers and awesome, and I'll absolutely be champing at the bit to go see that. I don't know if that's true or not. I think that's just 100% rumor, but it would make a lot of sense to me. I could see how that would work out. So how would you feel if at the end of the final season, the story still isn't resolved and we've got a movie, 2 more hours to finish that story off? I would be all for it. I would have fun. I would have a movie watching party for sure. How would you feel? Let me know. But with that, I've said about everything I can think to say about these 4 episodes, shared nothing but my excitement for the next batch of episodes coming out soon. I will be watching all those, getting reactions and reviews up for each episode as quickly as I can after I watch them. And with that, I want to say I'm proud of you for watching anime, and I'll talk to you again soon. I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. It really means a lot to me. If you think you might be in a position to support the channel, there is a link to the Bruce Leslie Anime Dad Patreon in the video description. Thank you.